Hello, and many thanks for joining us on this edition of the program, People, Politics, and Power. I am Imoni Amarere. Last week, the National Economic Council, NEC, met in Abuja, the Nigerian capital, the first such meeting by the body under the Tinubu administration. The council said at the end of the meeting that it considered recommendations from the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission to pay 702 billion naira as cost of living allowance to civil servants as part of intervention plans to mitigate the effects of fuel subsidy removal. According to the governor of Bauchi State, Bala Mohammed, who spoke for the council, the intervention will include a recommended sum of between 23.5 billion and 45 billion naira per month as petroleum allowance to cushion the effect on civil servants. This is in addition to other suggestions to review salaries and wages of public servants. What was not made very clear about this proposal, for which a committee of the council has now been empaneled to review and draw up a term of reference, is whether this palliative package will be extended beyond federal civil servants to include workers in the public services of the various states. When President Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced an end to fuel subsidy on his inauguration day on May 29, it was immediately felt by every Nigerian and, of course, businesses as well. This presupposes that any thought of ways and means of alleviating the consequent hardships should be holistic to include all Nigerians, particularly the most vulnerable in the Nigerian society, the multidimensionally poor amongst the Nigerian populace. The multidimensional poverty index, which was released last year, shows that there are about 133 million Nigerians who are multidimensionally poor out of a population of about 200 million. Now, statistics indicate that nearly 12% of the world's population in extreme poverty live in Nigeria alone. Considering the poverty threshold of $1.90 per day. Now, there is no doubt that the removal of fuel subsidy in the last 3 weeks has worsened that situation and driven more people deeper into extreme poverty. There is also no doubt that it is not only public sector workers who constitute a fraction of the population that are severely impacted by this development. The question that has been playing on the lips of many since the NEC announcement last Thursday is why the consideration for only public sector employees, who constitute just about 2.1 million by 2020 records and data. What happens to the staggering number of private sector workers, the self-employed in the informal sector, those who are in trading, in agriculture, apprenticeship, household employees, and, of course, the unemployed, who constitute the vast majority of Nigerians? What palliatives are being considered for these categories of people? Why the disaggregation between public sector Nigerians and others in the provision of welfare packages to alleviate the hardship that has been brought about by the fuel subsidy removal? We shall also be looking at how far the proposed 702 billion naira allowance for workers can go and what ripple effects it is or it can have on the economy. These are the issues we'll be looking at on the program today. And of course, I'm joined by two gentlemen. First, my guest who is here in the studio, Aliko Victor. Aliko Victor is a development economist and policy analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We are joined virtually from Lagos by an economist, Paul Alaje. Paul Alaje, of course, is a familiar face on our programs. Mr. Alaje, thank you so much for finding time to join us. All right, so hopefully Mr. Alaje should join us in a while. But let's take a short break. When we return, we will be bringing you a clip of what the Bauchi State Governor, Bala Mohammed, said after the or at the end of that inaugural NEC meeting, which took place right here in the presidential villa here in Abuja.
23 or to 45 billion monthly offer to cushion the effect to workers. Another suggestion that will go a long way in making sure that there is review of our salaries and wages. And in addition to the palliation that Governor Kazina has said, government looked at all the issues, the challenges and problems holistically and set up a small committee of council to review and come up with a term of reference to recognize areas specifically where this palliation can come and how it will be dispensed to alleviate the problem of workers and other vulnerable groups. Members of the committee, the membership is composed of Governor of Kebbi as chairman, Governor of Anambra representing the Southeast geopolitical zone, Governor of Benue, North Central, Governor of Kaduna, Northwest, my humble self representing the Northeast, Governor of Cross River, South-South, and Governor of Oyo State, Southwest. Other relevant agencies were also included. They comprised of Budget Office, representative of the CBN, representative of the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, representative of NNPC, representative of TUC and NLC, and of course Rukayat Rufai, so that we can sit within 2 weeks to come up with a recommendation to NEC.
Of Bauchi State, Bala Mohammed there, who spoke on behalf of the National Economic Council after his meeting last Thursday here in the nation's capital, and of course read out the names of members of that committee that is supposed to do a review and put forward a term of reference for the council to consider in deciding whether or not the 702 billion naira recommendation by the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission should be paid as allowances to workers. Now, the question is, how far can that go? And how many Nigerians are likely to benefit from that? Another question is cash palliative the most appropriate thing to consider at this point in time in dealing with the issue of subsidy removal? Right here in the studio with me is Aliko Victor, a development economist and policy analyst, and of course is joined via Zoom by Paul Alaje, who is also an economist. Mr. Alaje, thank you for finding time to join us.
Thank you so very much for having me. A beautiful afternoon to you, sir.
Beautiful afternoon. Right. So let's begin this way. What do you think of these recommendations that have now been made to the National Economic Council, which had its first meeting last Thursday? I mean, it's instructive that the very first business the council had to deal with was considering the recommendation of the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission.
Well, I would like to say that it is popular knowledge to say prevention is better than cure, but do nothing is worse than cure. So what that means is when we talk of the decision to remove subsidy, the best option would have been to prevent the hardship of subsidy removal on the people. So if we are provided local refineries, which are spoken on your platform over 100 times, if I'm not exaggerating, across shows, again, what is available to Nigeria now is how do we provide. Our government is proposing, let us share money to household, maybe 10 million household. Remember that that is not the decision of this administration. The former administration felt that was the right thing, and we heard the former Minister of Finance said that was the thing they were going to proceed to the new administration. But in the real sense of it, what must be done? And just cash palliative, can it solve the problem? The answer is no. Cash palliative alone would not solve the problem. There are several other options that we think that government should consider so that the decision to help those that government is always interested in protecting, the poor, will eventually be protected. I will start with this. We've seen Labour, I think Labour should be meeting federal government today on the same topic as to how do they protect their members. And when I say their members, not just those working with federal government, but labor all over Nigeria. So if the interest of the labor, of the labor union is to protect their members, what should they be looking at? Number one, if I have time to discuss them one after the other. The first one will be tax. Personal income tax today starts from 30,000 naira and below. With the current reality of exchange rates, that's number one. Number two, it has been announced that the cost of energy may increase by 40% from 1st of July. I've not seen anyone debunking that. If cost of buying electricity would increase by 40%, cost of PMS has also increased because subsidy has been removed and foreign exchange has been taken off fixed rates. It has again been taken to the flexible rate. What all of this means to an economist is that inflation would increase. Right now, we're talking of over 22%. With subsidy removal alone, we're expecting to go to about 28%. When you had exchange rates to it, then you'll be talking about 32, 35%. With the announcement at 1st of July, there could be 40% increase in cost of electricity. Then you should be looking at around 40%. So when you put all of this together, for the same population, with 133 million people living below poverty line, not my figures, the National Bureau of Statistics, UNDP, number of organizations said so. What we need to do is, how do we reduce the impact of them? It will come from fiscal policy. The amount they are paying as taxes, we are of the opinion that government should change the amount people are paying as taxes from those that are earning below 30,000 naira not to pay to now be those that are earning below 60,000 naira. So that the difference, their disposable income will make a lot of sense. At least they know taxes are being, even that tax amount is very negligible too. We also need to know that if today's exchange rate at 660, for instance, is what labor is paid, if you convert 30,000 naira, to convert 30,000, divide 30,000 naira by 660, you see that effectively people have been thrown back into poverty net. Remember that is what President Buhari have tried to avoid when he set up a committee to review minimum wage. And minimum wage, today, people that are now earning less than 2,000, professors in university are earning $500. Professors in the university, maximum they earn $600 a month. Those are too small amounts of money. Now we want to compete globally. We want our people to pay the cost of PMS that they are paying in America, which is fine, which is good. Because of growth, there are a lot of benefits to subsidy removal, the way we have a lot of downside to subsidy removal. So we want our population to pay, but we must understand that this economy must also protect those people by guaranteeing better, affordable, livable income to them. So these are the challenges that government needs to look at. So what amount is therefore reasonable? Labor is promoting between 150 to 200. I can tell you that even if government we look at, government will be looking between 60 to 70,000 naira. But what will all of this mean? More inflation, more stagflation. Even though revenue of government will improve, we now need to work with the government to ensure that the increase in revenue, and I mean federal and majorly subnational, the increase in revenue go into infrastructure. The increase in revenue must go into infrastructure so that we can now allow private sector to become more effective. But when we don't have that, then we will have exactly what happened when subsidy on diesel was removed, and I'm still looking for the impact. This diesel, the subsidy on kerosene has been removed. You know, people say in the long run we will see the benefit. The long run of diesel should have come by now. It is long enough. The long run of kerosene is long enough by now. We should have seen the impact. Unfortunately, some of those impacts are not yet felt. But you see, we need to give this government some level of benefit of the doubt, which is important because it's a new government. We see the president that seems to want to take the bull by its horn to ensure that things get rolling. Because I must be sincere with you, if subsidy is not removed by next year, we'll be spending about 7.5 trillion naira on subsidy.
Okay.
That's on one hand, yes.
Yes. Paul, a number of issues that you have thrown on the table now. But first, let me turn to Aliko Victor here, who is with me in the studio. I need to differentiate between what the National Economic Council is talking about in terms of allowances to public sector workers, to federal, to civil servants, and increase in minimum wage, because that is one of the options that it is considering. Now, what do these allowances mean for these civil servants? Where is it going to come from, and how is it going to be disbursed to these civil servants?
Well, thank you very much for that question. But I think one very pertinent thing we should bear in mind is that when salaries are being calculated, you have allowances for like housing, you have for medicals, you have allowances for some other additions that will make up the entire salaries. And then you have the basic salary itself. Yeah, so if you look at the allowances they are talking about, what is still not clear is what allowances exactly are they talking about. That's still an issue that is contentious. But then another worrying factor we should consider from the proposal from the government is that just like the statistics you read out, 2.1 million as of 2020 constitutes just about 1% of Nigeria's entire population. If you peg it at 200 million, then it begins on us to ask the question, what then happens to those in the private sector, like you've asked? And then it's disturbing for us, particularly for some of us in the private sector, in the sense that those in the private sector, not like businesses, not like firms or companies at this time, are getting more revenues that would ordinarily warrant them to increase the salaries or allowances of their own staff. Is still a contentious issue. But then my worry about it is just like my colleague Alaji has said, it's going to fuel inflation. And if you look at the correlation between inflation and poverty, has a strong correlation. Most recent index, if you look at World Poverty Clock, they are saying about 91 million Nigerians are living below $1.9 per day. It's still a disturbing issue. That means if you're currently earning the current minimum wage of 30,000 at the moment, if you juxtapose it to $1.9 per day, do the calculation at 660 naira per dollar, you see that if you're even on the current 30,000 naira minimum wage, which more than 2/3 of the states have failed to approve since 2019, it means you're already living in extreme poverty. So what is not clear is government's position. I want to believe that within 2 weeks that the committee has been given to review the issue, they will come out and make it clear to Nigerians what allowance exactly are they talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, again, another very contentious issue there, Paul, is the question of who these allowance, when they eventually decided what kind of allowance it is, it will be applied to? Will it be restricted to federal civil servants, or will it go down the line to civil servants at state level? And
well,
if it is, where will the states get the money to effect that kind of payment on their own? If, as Victor has said here, some of these states, in fact, several of these states have been unable to pay minimum wage of 30,000 naira for over 4 years.
Well, the good news is that with the removal of subsidy, federal government and states will share the proceeds. So if you watch very well before now, which I've seen on your platform most of the time, even state governors were the one pushing further for subsidy to be removed, because they know that when subsidy is removed, part of the funds that will go to their respective states would increase, because 7 trillion naira approximately, or what will be shared by next year, 7.5 trillion, will be shared among the 3 tiers of government. It will not just be federal government that will be paying subsidy for people. It is the federal, state, and local government. The money is taken from federation account. And before now, what NNPC has been doing is under recovery, which means money that should have gone to federal allocation account has not been going there. So now, when we talk about who is going to benefit from it, federal government will set up committee as usual. The committee will make recommendations, but they don't have the power to enforce the decision on the state government. I tell you this, as of today, for you not to be poor, as of today, which I know that by next week will change, you need to earn 37,620 naira if you don't want to be poor. But minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000. So that is why I said I'm sure government will do something. And you know, about 3 weeks ago, I posted on Twitter and I mentioned that people should expect exchange rate to go above 600 naira. I saw a number of persons criticize it, you know, and I said this will happen in a matter of days. 14 days after that became a reality. Even the 660 is expected to even go further worse off, because people that are looking for Naira are less than people that are looking for dollar. And I said that in plain language so that everybody can understand it. The demand, now professionally speaking, the demand for dollar outweighs that of its counterpart Naira. For us to find a permanent solution, which is what I've championed over the years, you know, it will be that we must export. And in the long run, we can find import substitution. We are not exporting enough. And I like to cite example. The 3 of us having this conversation, and those that are watching us now, or those that will watch us in the future, chances are that even though the clothes they wear are imported, even though they are tailored, or the designer may be in Nigeria, but in the real sense, the material is not made in Nigeria. Where are the jobs? Are the jobs here in Nigeria or they are abroad? So when we make some policy, we should understand the implications of the policy. The implication of this is inflation. And inflation is the necessary ingredient for poverty. Why? It attacks people's disposable income. Disposable income is money that you have available for you to spend. So when it says disposable income, it weakens it. I give you an example. Some people earn 250,000 and he got a job, you know, 1st of January. The man resumes. By 1st of January, he's paid 250,000 naira. That person will perhaps go to church or go to mosque and share testimony that he got a job for himself and other 5 members of his family, wife, 4 children. But do you know that by end of this year, 2023, December 31st, 2023, the value of that money has been reduced to less than 100,000 naira. Not because the organization will not pay him 250, but because when he takes the same money to the market, he will now buy what? He will not buy up to 100,000. You know who said so? The National Bureau of Statistics. When you look at the average inflation rates on annual basis, Y-on-Y, from 2021 to 2023, it has been, values of money have depreciated by more than 20%. And this is what the agency of government have said. And you can verify it even in our own basket of commodities, in our consumer price index. It is huge, it is impact. So who should get allowance? It should be the entire Nigerians. And how should we give allowance to entire Nigeria? So we have to look for things that is not, you cannot exclude others from consuming it. And that will come mostly in form of infrastructure. What does that mean? Food inflation is the current driver of the Nigeria's headline inflation. The theater of inflation is at the urban center. So what should we be doing to food inflation? We have to do everything possible to bring the cost of food down. Major fear for next month and maximum August. The rates are here. What is the guarantee that we will not have another flood? When you have another flood, the price of onions, the price of rice will be affected again. This is not the first time we're expecting flood. But could this be the last time that we're going to think a major preventive measure to some of our challenges? That's it. So how do we reduce food inflation? Cost of logistics is a major reason for food inflation. Insecurity, major reason for food inflation. Among other factors, can we solve these two? That's it. Inflation is happening at the urban center. What is responsible? Most of our consumption in urban center are imported. And we are not exporting enough. The good news with floating rates that government has announced is that if you have want Nigeria to have access to some FX, because it is now willing buyer and willing seller. So if you are willing to buy, enough people are not willing to buy at 461, but more people are certainly willing to sell at 660. So you are going to see some new inflows. But how long will it take us to clear the backlog? Remember that Emirates Airline, I'm talking to the rich now, they are not able to come. Most Nigerians are affected abroad. Visas are not renewed for them. And these are people that were responsible for our remittances at home. Because the economy is connected. So that's it. Look at the poor. If the prices goes higher, because with FX increase, that means when that thing is imported to Nigeria, it's going to affect the poor, especially those who cannot afford it. So that is why we have always advocated for an holistic view of economy before the policy is made. Because for every economic decision you make, or most of the economic decisions you make, there are trade-offs. For positive economic decisions you make, you need to watch out for the possible outcome, so that at the end of the day, the policy will not become policy somersault.
All right. Okay, so Victor, now flowing from what Paul has just said now, assuming, for instance, that the proposal put forward now to NEC by the Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission of 702 billion naira, assuming it says true, and assuming that federal civil servants and civil servants at the state level will benefit, you still have majority of Nigerians who are not captured in that category, who are outside this palliative measure. What happens to them? Victor has been talking about the whole problem of Nigeria not exporting enough. Nigeria is not even producing enough for its own consumption, talk much less of export apart from oil. Where do we start from?
Well, I must say this. It's surprising that there was a national consensus amongst the elites that subsidy should be removed. But I'm also worried that among the elites, there are no national consensus for development. By development, I mean economic growth and development of the standard of living of the average Nigerian. And another worry I have is that if we judge by statistics, if we look at our socioeconomic indicators, Nigeria in 2016 was considered as the world poverty capital of the world. Not sure much from that has changed. If you look at the World Bank Development Report for last year, it stated that as at when inflation was about 15.5%, about 6 million Nigerians fell below the poverty line. Now, if you also look at other ripple effect, Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. We are judged to have the worst infant mortality rate in the world for children within the ages of 0 to 2. If you also go further, looking at our current inflation rate at 22.4% is still disturbing. Now, the answer is simple. For those in the private sector, they'll be left with no option. Like we can find, if you take a street pool, if you take a pool now on the street, which I have some friends who have been earning 50,000 naira, 40,000 naira before the removal of subsidy. And after the removal of subsidy, if they calculate their transportation costs on a daily basis, it simply makes no sense for them to continue with the job. Now, there are a lot of ripple effects, one of which it is clear to us is extreme poverty. We have more Nigerians fall below the poverty line. That aside, we'd also have cases of food insecurity, like my colleague has mentioned. A lot of Nigerians will find it super difficult for them to have access to just 1 square meal. Now, we're not talking of 3 square meals a day, because it's super, super difficult. If you also look at some of the measures that was proposed by the former administration, the former Minister of Finance, Nigeria made efforts to take about $800 million loan
from the World Bank,
to give 5,000 naira to about 10 million extreme poor Nigerians for 6 months. And I asked myself, 5,000 naira for a household of 4 persons, 5 persons, 6 or 10, what will be the significant impact on them? And now if you look at Nigeria's, if you look at our population per se, we have about 47 million Nigerians that are in our social register. So assuming you're giving 5,000 naira on a monthly basis to about 10 million households, what happens to the other 37? Now we're also looking at statistics from World Poverty Clock. It's saying 71 million Nigerians are extremely poor. You're looking at World Bank report. It's saying that about nearly 90 million Nigerians are extremely poor. We're looking at statistics from MBS saying that 133 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. When we say multidimensionally poor, it goes beyond food. It means access to healthcare. It means access to electricity. It means access to good housing. These are factors we have to look into. So what I see that might play out in the next couple of months is we're having some states now who are coming up with, I'll fairly say, innovative policies to see how civil servants can work 3 out of 5 days, working days in a week. Can that help? I'm not sure.
What will they be doing with the remaining days of the week? Do they have alternative jobs to do?
So for those,
are they going to the farms or what?
For those of us in the private sector, or even those in the government sector who are essential workers, when I mean essential workers, those in the medical field, they have to be physically present in their places of work. What then happens? So if you look at the ripple effect it's having on the economy, I am worried that Mr. President did not announce on the day he was announcing that fuel subsidy is gone. I am worried he did not announce that they will be cutting the cost of governance. We have seen governors of some states who are already announcing that they are having 50 special advisors. Cost of governance in Nigeria is very high. And another question I think we should also be asking the committee is, if they are increasing the minimum wage of workers in Nigeria, are you sure it doesn't also affect the political class, the elites, where we're already complaining that the National Assembly is one of the most expensive in the world? What then happens? So does it mean that the minimum wage will not reflect in the salaries and allowances of politicians? We need to cut down the cost of governance. I have that issue. And for me, I also think that there is need for an urgent public service reforms. Because public service reform is the engine or is the instrument of government that will drive government's policies and initiatives. Whatever policy we want to suggest now, whatever palliative measures we want to suggest to help the average Nigerian, it is the public service that will implement those initiatives. They are closer to the people than Mr. President in Aso Rock. So my worry is with the kind of economic system we have at the moment, where you have civil servants or labor agitating for fairly 150 to 200 on a monthly basis, just like my colleague also said, I doubt the government would even accept for 100,000. But all these things will fuel inflation. Those in the private sector, myself inclusive, will be left with no option to have our disposable income being affected. That is our income to spend after taxation. So we have these issues, and then what is the way forward? He has made some suggestions. It is important we look at how private sector can also benefit from this thing. He mentioned the distance between, if you look at access to the market. Most of the agrarian commodities we have in Nigeria, in the food, in the north, in the southern part of Nigeria, are in remote villages. They need access routes to the urban centers, to the city centers, where these inflations are worse off. And for me, I tell people, I get worried that Mr. President, before he was sworn in on May 29, I would have suggested he would have come up with a policy plan already on ground before the announcement of the removal of subsidy. So once he's making the announcement, the palliative measures or the policy plans he have on ground is already running. Public transportation is another area where we are not looking at seriously. Because if you look at the impact of public transportation, both to those in the private sector and those in the public sector, we all use public transport. So I think it's another area where the government should be shifting attention towards, investing in sound and efficient public transport system that will help to douse the impact of the fuel subsidy removal on the average Nigerian.
Yeah, Paul, you've been very consistent about the issue of energy cost, which, as we understand now, might rise again, might increase by the beginning of
40%.
July. There is also speculation about a possible petroleum tax, a 7.5% petroleum tax. If that is true and it becomes reality, then of course we are likely to see more an increase in the price of the pump price of petroleum products right now. Now, if this is the case and we are looking at, say, deploying the income from these removal of subsidy into providing infrastructure at different levels. There are those who are suggesting that we might just as well be looking at alternative energy sources for Nigeria at this point in time, and that our continued dependence on oil might just in the long and even in the medium term not sustainable. What do you think?
First, we must understand the importance of energy. Why I'm able to talk to you today from Lagos and as the anchor and my colleague in Abuja with you, you are able to talk and shake your head, carry your hands, do everything you are doing. It simply shows that you have energy. When it will cost you more than you can afford, you know, as persons, to use your energy, then it becomes a thing of concern to you and the people around you. So the way it is true for individuals, it is so true for businesses and a nation. So when the cost of energy goes up, you are going to see that the overall performance of energy in such economy or in such country will go down. So when you look at cost of energy, we are talking of electricity, we are talking of diesel, you are talking of kerosene, you are talking of jet A1, you are talking, so look at all the costs. Remember that there was a time the airline operator says they will be flying, I think, about 100,000. And what we saw on social media was that the number of people that will fly reduced. Security has not left the road. But people need to look at their income, because the bottom line is where they are able to raise money to fly or to move from one point or the other, or they have money to even recharge the unit in their homes, it's their disposable income. So when the disposable income is not growing, but the expenses are growing, then there is a challenge. So you see that people may become poorer by committing no offense, by working harder. They can actually be working so hard and they will be sincerely poor. Now you ask, are we be looking at alternative to maybe oil-based energy? The answer is yes. We have seen, we have heard from previous administration that they were going to convert people's petrol tanks to gas, because that will reduce the impact. Now, why that is important is because when you look at the price elasticity of what's it called, of petrol-based or petrochemical or petrol-based energy, you see that the demand for it is high, is very high. It's almost perfectly inelastic at whatever price people are willing to buy. So because there are no alternatives available for people, the same with energy. And I've cited this instance over and over again. You are in Abuja there, I'm in Lagos. If you say you don't need AEDC again in your station or anywhere in Abuja, you don't want to use AEDC, what alternative do you have? So it is monopolistic in nature. And that's the danger of monopoly. Monopoly can raise price, and it will say demand should go and decide quantity. He knew that the demand has no option, especially when it's a good of necessity. People will always buy. That's economics. So monopoly cannot decide the two, but we always opt to decide price most of the time and allow you to demand to decide quantity. He understands that the good he's selling is an important good. He knew you will always come for it. So what should we have done? We should have looked at alternative or multiple operator in cases where it is possible. People say when we liberalize GSM market, GSM was not monopoly. It's not monopoly. Lagos, I'm in Ikeja now. In Ikeja, if I don't want to use Ikeja Electric, what option do I have? I will resort to generator. And for how long can I run that? So there is a place of infrastructure. So I want to believe that the new government will depart from our policy inconsistency of the old government. So I'm happy they set up a committee. I've seen NEC taking some decisions. I'm hopeful that some of those decisions they are taking, they will look at holistic measure. It will not be like last administration that started with quick fixes. And I remember that I had a conversation with one of your colleagues, Mr. Gbenga, where I said quick fixes don't fix economic problems. Economic problems are not what you can just say you want to administer a paracetamol for stomach ache, or you want to give chloroquine for someone that has cancer. You need to treat it. You need to cut off some parts. You need to dress the wound. You need to make permanent solution for the life to be protected. And I hope that this is what we'll see with the new administration.
All right, Victor. Do you align yourself with that line of thought, or do you disagree?
Yeah, I think I partly agree, but I think I want to bring another dimension to the conversation. If you look at the recent electricity bill that was just signed into law by President Tinubu, if that bill was to be followed to the latter, it gives us confidence that the energy situation in Nigeria might improve. I will give an instance. If you look at the ripple impact or the multiplier effect of increasing cost of energy to businesses, it means a lot of businesses might close down. If you have a man by the corner of a street who's a barber or who has a hair salon, he has no option than for him to devise innovative means for him to run his business. Because if somebody who is unable to feed properly, or an average Nigerian goes there to cut his hair and you're telling him to bring 1,000 or 2,000, he won't be able to afford it. So I've seen cases where some micro businesses or small MSMEs are resorting into innovative solutions. I'll give you an instance. Some hair salons are now resorting to solar-powered clippers. Some are resorting to clippers that are chargeable. That is once you rechargeable or chargeable clippers, so as to ensure that whether or not there is light, they can be able to cut somebody's hair and still get some out of it. So, but the ripple effect is that once you have rising energy costs, it's going to impact. My worry is businesses, because like you rightly said, Nigeria has to grow her economy. Nigeria needs to grow our GDP. Nigeria, not only growing our GDP, we should be looking at export to grow our economy. So it is disturbing that energy costs, not just to Nigeria alone, if we want to be fair to ourselves, some other nations globally, you have Germany, you have United Kingdom, their energy cost is rising. So how do we address it? Now, it leaves us with the option that a lot of persons are complaining about the removal of subsidy, fuel subsidy, because fuel is very crucial to our economy. If we have a system where somebody can even boast of a 20 hours power supply on a daily basis, the impact will be less on household income. If we have a situation where we have a working train system, back to infrastructure that my colleague mentioned, we have less impact to talk about using our private cars or public transport to ensure that we manage or maximize our disposable income. So these are the issues. Energy is crucial to our economy, not just to businesses, to the ordinary Nigerians. And I get worried. And that's why if you look at signs from Mr. President's recent appointment, I want to believe that there are positive signs, if we must give him credit for that. But I want to believe that the appointment of ministers, the appointment of some other critical or crucial positions of those who will manage our economy going forward will be individuals who are experts, who understand the challenges of the average Nigerian. Not only picking up policies when they think it favors the elites, but policies that we can domesticate, policies that are inclusive, and policies that would affect the average Nigerian. And like I said, energy is super, super important. And I hope that part of the proceeds that will be saved from the removal of subsidy will be channeled towards addressing Nigeria's epileptic power supply.
Labour has resumed talks with government. What are your expectations?
I want to believe that Labour, something positive will come out of it, in the sense that, like my colleague said, Labour they are representing not just those in the public sector, they're also representing those in the private sector, so long as you're a worker in Nigeria. That talk, I want to believe that the conversation they're having with Mr. President or Mr. President's team will come out positive. When I mean come out positive, the minimum wage should be reviewed. I am proposing, personally, within the range of 80 to about 120 for minimum wage. They are asking for about 150 to 200. I want to also believe that as we have had a national consensus that fuel subsidy payment is no longer sustainable, we should remove it. There should also be a national consensus amongst the elite to say that payment of salaries of Nigerians must be reflective of our current economic realities. I am confident that Labour, having that negotiation with Mr. President, will come out positive for Nigerian workers. Not only Nigerian workers, those who are in the federal, state, and local government, and also ensure the implementation for those in the private sector. But again, my worry is the fact that some of these policies are incoherent. You have a situation whereby you're trying to increase the salaries or wages of civil servants, and at the other hand, you're still trying to look for other alternative means, either through rising energy costs, either through floating of the Naira, which will also, at the long run, remove the disposable income from the average Nigerian. So I think this policy incoherence can be addressed, and I'm confident that Labour will come out.
What of Nigerians who are in the informal sector?
Again,
who protects their interests?
Again, Nigerians who are in the informal sector, by extension, probably private individuals who have businesses, some of which are unaccounted for, then it begins on them that once, that's the essence of inflation, once there's rise in the cost of goods and commodities, it is only normal for them because their cost of production is rising. If you look at inflation in Nigeria, it's more of a cost push inflation. The cost of them transporting their goods through logistics, the cost of them producing, or the cost of these individuals who are unaccounted for in the informal sector, maybe a woman by the corner of my street who is selling banana, it is only common for her, if her landlord have increased her rent, if the cost of her transporting herself from the house to her business premises have increased, it is only normal that they would increase the prices of their goods and services. But I worry that on the long run, some businesses may not be able to survive and they might be pushed out of business.
It's almost out of reach now to buy banana here in Abuja, I can tell you that. But yeah. Paul, let's have your last take on this. If you had the opportunity of speaking directly with the president today, what would you be telling him? What direction would you be pointing him to?
So first of all, I'll be telling Mr. President that two decisions that have been made, we need to now allow people to breathe on them. First, for people to breathe, we need to allow for the amount that minimum wage will be. It should immediately leave 30,000 Naira because it's no longer reasonable. What it should be a minimum of 70 and a maximum of 100 to labor. Now, how do we improve on our infrastructure to pushing the impact of subsidy removal? By that, I mean the president should direct the railways to connect the narrow gauge of the Nigerian Railway Corporation. The narrow gauge should connect to farm producing area in Benue. It should connect to somewhere in Zamfara. It should connect to Kebbi, where farm grains are traded almost on weekly basis, so that the cost of transporting those grains will not impact on inflation. So for me, I think that is important for Mr. President to look at. 3, I will also want to advise Mr. President that if we allow floating rate for a long time, it will definitely have impact on cost, because Naira by nature is disadvantaged against the dollar. We are not producing enough as a nation. As a result, we are not exporting enough as a nation. So what we need to do is we need to organize, stay with a managed float. Yes, we are seeing 660. We hope that by the end of July, it will not have been worse than 700. But you know, between 600 to 700 will be a good way to leave it, while we wrap up with our production and grow our economy directly today. We should also understand that with this 5 trillion naira has been added to our debt profile. I will repeat, with the decision to float exchange rate, 2.5 trillion, as I talk to you today, has been added to our debt profile. Not that we borrow more money, but because the money we have collected in hard currency are also being devalued. And when you check the numbers, you can only but wait till the second quarter report that will be released by the Debt Management Office, and you'll see how the debt profile has increased even without borrowing any money directly. So as much as we want to devalue, and see how we can have some inflows, which I understand that at this time it's a necessary evil for us to do. It's also important to know that there's a limit to that, so that we quickly grow our economy and have the 6% GDP growth rate, even though that may be tough this year. But is it possible for us to achieve that year? I hope that is what is in the mind of President Tinubu, and that's a conversation, among other things, I'll be having with you.
Thank you so much, Paul. We'll leave it at that for now. That's hoping that those who are in power and authority are listening to some of these things. We want to thank you immensely. Paul Alaje is an economist, and he joined us virtually from Ikeja in Lagos. Thank you so much. And right here in the studio, we have Aliko Victor, who is a development economist and a policy analyst. Thank you so much, Victor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program, People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.